So I've been asked to summarize today's teachings. Rinpoche started with a quote from Shantideva Bodhicharyavatara, which was saying that basically Shantideva is talking to his disturbing emotions, and he's saying, up until now, you have all that you have done is harmed me. And so I'm not going to let you continue doing that. And then he says, I will hold a grudge against you. And in that way, I'm using disturbing emotions of holding a grudge to destroy the disturbing emotions. So that is the reference there, is to a grudge, that because you have harmed me so much in the past. And there are three strategies which can be used for overcoming the disturbing emotions or disturbing mental factors, because they're not all emotions, so disturbing mental factors. We can either just destroy them with the opponent forces, which would be the method of the initial and intermediate scopes of Lamrim, where we use first ethical discipline of refraining from acting destructively, on the basis of the disturbing emotions, and then apply ethical discipline and a concentration and the discriminating awareness of voidness to be the enemy and destroy them. Then the second method is to befriend them, and so using compassion and so on to overcome them. We can do it like that. Then I'm just looking here, if that's where it came. Anyway, that's the Bodhisattva way. And in terms of using compassion, I think it was here that Rinpoche, you mentioned great compassion. There's a difference between compassion, ordinary compassion, and immeasurable compassion and great compassion. Ordinary compassion is just to a limited number of beings. May you be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Immeasurable compassion is shared with the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, so with the Hinayanas, and that is for all sentient beings, but not including the Arhats, because the Arhats are free from suffering, the ordinary suffering of rebirth, and then great compassion only bodhisattvas have, or Buddha has as well, which is to benefit even the Arhats, to save them, to liberate them from the extreme of passive liberation. So that's the difference between ordinary compassion, immeasurable compassion, and great compassion. And then the third way, so we use compassion as a way to, for instance, love is the opposite of anger. So if we meditate on love, like this person is annoying me so bad, so much, and causing so much trouble for me, so to overcome that, we have love. I wish that they could be happy and have the causes for happiness so they would stop bothering me. So that is the way in which we use love, for instance, to overcome anger. So that's the method of befriending. And then using the disturbing emotions as a slave. This is more in the tantric way, but we can also understand it in the sutra way if we look in terms of Shantideva, that this was holding a grudge in order to against the disturbing emotions. So we use that disturbing emotion of a grudge, or in another verse he speaks about having pride, which is sort of a self-confidence to overcome arrogance. So this is using, taking that disturbing emotion, using it as a slave to get rid of the disturbing emotions. So that is this third method, in a more sophisticated way in Tantra, but Rinpoche said not to explain that, so I won't, and to leave it on a sutra level. Then, because that's very misunderstood on the Tantra level. In order to get rid of the disturbing emotions, we need to have knowledge of the 12 links and stop the whole process of 12 links so that we don't take rebirth by karma, by the force of the karma and disturbing emotions, but by great compassion, by the force of great compassion and stainless prayer. We don't want to go off to a pure land or anything like that, but the Bodhisattva wants to continue to reborn wherever there is suffering, wherever there is need, until, to the extent of all sentient beings of space, like at the prayer at the end of Shantideva of the 10th chapter that His Holiness loves so much. May I stay as long as space endures, to work for the benefit of others. So you don't want to go off to a pure land for that, and then they have to wait who knows how long before you're really ready. You become a Buddha. His Holiness always speaks like that. He has no wish to go to a pure land. The real enemy is self-grasping. So grasping, remember we said that word grasping is to project some sort of impossible way of existing on persons. That's certain levels of that, and then on all phenomenon, including persons, and then perceiving that. So perceiving, projecting it, perceiving it, and taking it to be real. So we need to understand that what we project, and take to be real, and even just perceive, doesn't correspond to anything real. There is a total absence of that. That's what voidness means. Total absence, no such thing. And it doesn't throw or toss anything affirming in terms of that. Like, there's the container, the glass, which is empty of something. And we need to do that in order to get rid of we need to understand voidness, get rid of ignorance, in order to break the chain of dependent arising on the 10th link, which is further existence. The word for rebirth, actually, is the Tibetan word, further existence. That link, the 10th link, is explained as both the 5 aggregates and throwing karma. So the 5 aggregates, when we speak about further existence, well, further existence is with the 5 aggregates, whether it is in death existence, bardo existence, the existence, death existence, bardo existence, the existence before the next death. So we have these 4 types of existence with the aggregates, and then giving the name of the result, that further existence with the 5 aggregates, to the cause, which is throwing karma. Throwing karma is activated karmic potential, and what we need to understand here is that there are two phases of karmic potential. So the actual karmic impulse, remember we were saying that it is a compelling urging in one of the three destructive or constructive actions of the mind, and for the actions of body and speech, it is the compulsive movement of the body, motion of the body, or utterances of the speech that are the method that are implemented or used to cause the action to take place. And so the first phase of karmic potential or karmic force is the actual impulse itself, so that compulsiveness of it, and then it takes on the essential nature of a seed, of a tendency. So that's afterwards, after the action has reached its, here I've never been quite sure, because in some actions the finale is reached instantly, with the application of the method, and sometimes it doesn't happen till later. But so I'm not quite sure what the boundary is of when it turns into that positive force, but it would have to be in terms of just now thinking with logic. It has to be, if it's the motion of the body, it has to be when the motion has ended, not when the finale happens. So there are these two phases, so that when it was saying, from the karma that of the mental actions, it acts as a positive force then for, first it was said the karma from actions of body and speech. So those are the revealing forms, motion of the body and the utterances of the speech, of the voice, that these then, that potential from it, positive or negative potential, is going to give rise in terms of the aggregates to the form aggregate, and from the karmic potential, which is that karmic urging in the action of the mind, and then the seed from that gets activated, and that is going to give rise to the other four aggregates, which are mental factors, basically, distinguishing, feeling somewhere on the spectrum of happy and unhappy, and consciousness, 6 types of consciousness, and other affecting variables, which are all the other mental factors, including the ones not included in the list of 46 or 51, 46 in Vasubandhu and Sautrantika, 51 in Chittamatra and Madhyamaka. And also there are in that aggregate of other affecting variables, all the rest. Then you also have the other non-static phenomenon, the ones that are non-congruent affecting variables, like the person aging, these sort of things. So all of that is there. The karmic potential is activated by incorrect consideration, and incorrect consideration has an incorrect way of taking the object. That was left out in the translation. Taking or grasping is that same word which is used in self-grasping. So it is taking something as an object and thinking that it is correct. And this is incorrect. So it is taking it discordant, not in accord, literally not as it actually is. And so there are 2 levels of that. There is the incorrect consideration, which is just of the 4 types of considering something which is impermanent or non-static, so changing to be unchanging, to be static, taking something which is the nature of suffering to be in the nature of happiness, to take something which is impure to be in the nature of pure, and something which is not a self, and this is referring to, because it has to be in common with the Hinayanas, with Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, so just considering something, a self which is non-static, has parts, and can't exist independently of the aggregates, to take it as the opposite of that it's static, partless, and can exist independently with liberation. So that is one type of incorrect consideration. And then deeper than that is the incorrect consideration of considering something which is not self-established to be self-established, established by something on its own side, by itself, or in conjunction with mental labeling. So, and with that, we either take the aggregates to be equal to the self. This is the Charvaka position, that that the self is identical with the aggregates, because the Charvakas don't believe in future rebirth. So when the aggregates are finished, the self is finished. So that's their position. So that is, when we say one, neither one nor many, one means totally identical. So the old Serkong Rinpoche used to say that, people call me Alex, but my legal name is Alexander. So he says Alex and Alexander are different, are two different things. Alex and Alex are one. So it has to be, even if there are two names for the same thing, they're not identical. When we talk about one, it's exactly the same thing. So they take it, the Charvakas take the self to be one with the aggregates, and the other non-Indian schools take it to be different from the aggregates. It's a different nature. It is the inhabitant of the aggregates. It comes into them and makes use of them and controls it. I always, use the silly example of, a little me talking in our head and pressing the buttons of, what should I say now? And it pushes the button for the voice to say something and pushes another button for the body to do something. And, the information comes on a screen and loudspeakers from the senses and so on. But we automatically feel it's like that because there's a voice talking in our head. And it seems as though someone's talking there, doesn't it? So anyway, but it is different from the aggregate. So it's separate, comes in and leaves, like going into a hotel and leaving. And it is of a different nature than the aggregate. So they say that the self is static, and it is pure, and it's in the nature of happiness, and now it takes as its place to inhabit the aggregates which are non-static and impure and in the nature of unhappiness. And so this is discordant. So that is an argument which is used for how it is really hypocritical. How can you have something, your pure self going into these dirty aggregates? So rather than the self being either, self being the person, me, what we call me or I tend to mostly use me rather than I, since people then start to think of your two eyes. It's a little bit confusing in English. Suppose in other languages, ich or whatever would not be so much of a problem. But that's why I use me, grasping for me and mine. Instead of the a person being either identical with the body or with the mind, and we or totally different, and the little person sitting in our head talking, it is tied. Remember that that word that is translated as imputed means that it is tied to the aggregates. It can't exist separate from the aggregates, and it can't be known separately from the aggregates. So the connotation of the Tibetan actually is most helpful here, that it's tied to it. So it's not that, and of course it is, you can only establish its existence in terms of the category of it, the concept of a self and the word self. But if you talk just about the self itself, it can be known non-conceptually, so it is just tied to the aggregates, can't be known separately from the aggregates. So it's not that the that it's established from the side of by the power of its defining characteristics or its self-nature. I'm saying the end of the sentence before the beginning. But what this is referring to is that if it can't be known separately, if it can't exist separately from the aggregates and can't be known separately from the aggregates, so this is in terms of the gross and subtle selflessness of persons, that, how is it that it doesn't exist separately? How is it that it can't be known? So there has to be something that you can find in the aggregates. So the Sautrantikas say that it can be the defining characteristic of a person is found on the side of mental consciousness. So mental consciousness is a basis for the defining characteristic of mental consciousness in person. Sometimes, since you're interested in terminology, people say an example of that this consciousness is an example of a person, and that really will just cause confusion. The technical term, it's a basis containing the defining characteristic of a person, literally. So so when you cognize the consciousness, and you also, so we tend to think that me is in the mental consciousness, and the mental consciousness goes into future lives, so the me goes into future lives, like that. And for Chittamatra, the defining characteristic and self-nature of the self is found in the foundation consciousness that goes on into future lives, the Alaya Vijnana. The whole discussion of that, no need to go there. And the Svatantrikas also say that, like the Sautrantikas, that the defining characteristic of the person is findable on the side of the mental consciousness. The Vaibhashikas said that the defining characteristic of a person is found on the side of the person, and establishes. So the person can be known independently of knowing the aggregates. So that's just they only have the rough or gross selflessness of persons, not the subtle one. The gross is that it can't exist separately from the aggregates. So they say it can't exist, it's tied to the aggregates, but it can be known by itself. it sort of covers over the aggregates in a sense. And the subtle selflessness is it can't be known without knowing first the aggregates and then simultaneously an aggregate and the self, the person. So, whereas Prasangika says that although the self has a defining characteristic that can be, so I can distinguish me from you, otherwise the aggregate of distinguishing couldn't function. Nevertheless, that defining characteristic doesn't have the power, either by itself or as the basis, for mentally labeling something, to establish that something exists. So it's like that. Then the further existence is speaking about the suffering of rebirth. That is why this further existence is suffering. It's the all-pervasive, the conditioned suffering. So what is it conditioned by? It is conditioned by the karma and disturbing mental factors. That's one explanation of it. And so it is affected by that. That second link was affecting, the affecting or affected factor of karma, conditioned factor that is affected by ignorance. Ignorance conditions it or affects it, therefore it's an affected factor, which is the karma, and then it will affect rebirth. So and that word affected is the same word of, all-pervasive, affecting, or affected suffering. It's the same word, just in a different grammatical form. So it fits like that. That's one explanation of why the rebirth is suffering, the all-pervasive, the conditioned suffering, and it is also because it's the basis on which we experience the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change, of suffering of ordinary happiness. It's on the basis of having that further existence, the continuing samsaric existence of rebirth, that on the basis of the body and mind, we experience unhappiness. That's the suffering of suffering, and suffering of change is ordinary happiness. That's what we're referring to with that. Suffering comes, right, I have to keep my place here. So samsara is in the nature of suffering. Then there's the discussion of death. We have the death is, there's the suffering of the appearances of this life coming to an end. So what happens as we are dying is that either you can explain it in terms of Tantra, the dissolution process, or just in general, that just before death there is a darkness in which there's no longer a hold on the, from Tantra they explained it in terms of mindfulness, so the glue is no longer there to hold on to the appearances of this lifetime. So we are in a type of darkness there, and then we freak out. That is the time where you freak out, because of this attachment that, they're no longer the appearances of this lifetime, and we were attached to the appearances of this lifetime. So that is the what is the most frightening before death, is that we no longer have the appearances of this lifetime. Rinpoche also explained from, I forget what the quote came from, I think it was from Tsongkhapa, that he said in Lamrim Chemo, that what is the source of a problem is that we take the basis for the imputation, so the basis on which the person is tied too narrowly. We only take that on the basis of the continuum of the aggregates in this lifetime. And so then we're freaked out because we don't have a basis of imputation, basis of the self being tied. Whereas if we think of beginningless past and future lives, then the self is tied to that whole thing, and then rebirth, death and rebirth is not very frightening because it's just another step, on the way. And so we tend to then identify with the little piece. So this is the type of advice that I always give to people when they lose a loved one or a relationship ends with someone, and then they had been identifying with the basis of imputation, on a we, being this couple, and just this period of their lives. And in order to get over it, they need to build up more basis of imputation of the me after that, so that they can, stop identifying just with that prior portion of their life and identify, you have to use skillful means. You can't start, with voidness. Don't identify with anything, but, but identify with a new portion. So it will, that's why they say pain heals with time. And that I found when I teach people that who are going through the suffering of somebody dying, that's quite helpful. So it comes from Tsongkhapa. I didn't know that in Lamrim Chemo. We need to expand the basis of imputation of the self, the basis of that the self is tied to the aggregates. So in order to overcome the fear of death and the suffering at the time of death, we get agitated, and by that no longer an appearance of this lifetime, and then we feel despair. This was translated as the word sorrow, but sort of, it's horrible. So like that. But what we need to understand is that in each moment arises and perishes simultaneously. So in each moment there is a death of that moment, and that is what aging is. So in aging, we are, each moment arises and dies in a sense, and so it is our old friend the perishing, and then that is subtle impermanence. The subtle impermanence is that things change from moment to moment to moment, and there are some things that change moment to moment to moment and do not degenerate, like the clarity and knowing quality of the mind doesn't degenerate. And then there are other things like the body, which as it changes from moment to moment is coming closer and closer to its end, the gross impermanence. So these are the difference between gross and subtle impermanence. Non-staticness changes from moment to moment to moment. We're not talking about eternal. So don't think of permanence as internal and impermanent as temporary. So there is, if we think in terms of a broader basis of imputation of the self, then we would not feel mental unhappiness at the time of death. And so even if we experience unhappiness of the what shall we say? The mental sensor is literally, I'll come back to that. Just speaking in general, we would not feel mentally unhappy, even though we might experience a lot of physical unhappiness, of the physical pain. So that was this whole discussion of the power of the mind was stronger than, the suffering of the body. And so what is causing the problem, the harm was the word. There can be harm to the physical cognitive sensors, so the body, the eyes, the ears, and so on. But the unhappiness at that harm, you can deal with that. But what harms the mental sensor? Mental sensor is the previous moment of consciousness. So what harms that is when it is filled with ignorance. And that then, it causes much more unhappiness when the cognitive sensor is harmed. So that was a subtle thing that was discussed in Chandrakirti. Then suffering comes from the mere coming together of cause and effect. So that was, you were saying the word, what was the word that he used? Aggregation. So it is the networking of that. So the collection, literally. So then I confirmed with Rinpoche, what's the difference between the mere collection of cause and effect, that's suffering, whereas Chandrakirti elsewhere is saying that the collection of the parts is not the chariot, in the 7-part refutation of the chariot, which no need to go through all 7 parts, but the chariot is not the collection of the parts. And for that, what we need to understand is that it's not the gathering together of truly established, self-established parts. So similarly, when we say that suffering arises from the mere gathering or, and networking of conditions and stuff like that, that was the other meaning, that the aggregates network together. It's not that you have truly existent aggregates that network together, because then they couldn't possibly interact with each other. And so similarly, we don't have cause and effect and conditions all being self-established, because then you couldn't have arising. So the mere networking of them or collection of them is on the basis of none of them being self-established. So that's the difference between this presentation and the refutation of the collection of the parts of the chariot being the chariot, the chariot is that. So that's an important point. And the other Buddhist tenet systems, when we speak about doctrinally based ignorance and doctrinally based disturbing emotions based on that, then it is not only doctrinally based on the basis of the non-Buddhist tenet systems, but also based on the, Prasangika says, on the so-called lower, less sophisticated Buddhist tenet systems. Believing in them is doctrinally based. Having learned, let's say, a Chittamatra point of view or Svatantrika, and accepting that is because there you're still asserting self-established existence, that is a doctrinally based disturbing mental state. That's why they have which is unique to Prasangika, that grasping for self-established existence is both doctrinally based and automatically arising, which is unique in Prasangika. So to understand, so the others, the other Buddhist tenet systems would say that they would agree that the suffering arises from the mere collection of cause and effect, but for them, it would be cause and effect which is not truly existent but is self-established existence. So that's their understanding of mere. So their word mere, which excludes, it's only this, not something else. So it excludes something. For them, it excludes truly established existence, which means independent of mental labor. But they would say, but there's a self-established existence on the basis that allows for the correct mental labeling. So they still are asserting something there. So that's their understanding of mere collection. So that has to be refuted. And from that mere coming together of causes and conditions, we have the subtle impermanence, so the simultaneous arising and perishing in each moment. Because of the having perished, it's a affirming negative, affirming negation phenomenon. So it leaves that there's no longer happening of the previous moment, and there will be an affirming thing, which is the arising of the next moment. So that's subtle impermanence. And from that mere coming together, that is also can only happen on the basis of the dependent arise. So it's not only what Rinpoche was saying is that there are two levels of dependent arising of cause and effect, which is just, a cause and conditions give rise to an effect, and the more subtle level of dependent arising of cause and effect has to do with this simultaneous arising and perishing of, the cause will subtle, through subtle impermanence give rise to the effect. As things ripen, as it gets older, ripening is aging, it gets, fruit ripens, so it's a slow process it ages and then falls off the tree. That type of ripening. Ripening has two meanings. Ripening just, it's the end or the process of ripening. So there are these two levels of dependent arising of cause and effect, and then there is the dependent arising in terms of imputation of that things are just the dependent arising, this mutual dependent arising I was referring to the other day. This type of mutual dependent arising is a basis of imputation and what is being imputed on it. So the basis and what's being imputed on it, either in terms of the an imputed, there's no word, what's tied to it. So the basis of what something is tied to and what is tied to it. So the self is tied to the basis, the aggregates, and then the what a concept or word refers to is tied to the basis, for that. So the basis of a person, concept of a person would be tied to, the aggregates. Whether you speak just in terms of how you would non-conceptually cognize it or conceptually. Yeah, I'm almost finished. Oh, I have to take my medicine. Thank you so much. Ah.
It's a reminder from the Zoom participant.
From the Zoom participant, yes. Well, if one were really devotional, one would say from a Dakini. Wonderful. So we have these two levels of dependent arising of cause and effect, and then the deepest level of dependent arising in terms of imputation. It is, although we can understand how the links work in terms of the dependent arising of cause and effect, of subtle cause and effect, that because it arises and perishes in each moment, and that previously having perished, it's going to give the next moment, and so the next links, connect causally like that. But on the deepest level, it is because that the cause and effect in each moment is not self-established, that you can have the connection of cause and effect in the 12 links. If we get rid of if we get rid of the grasping for things to be self-established, so projecting it and perceiving it and believing it, if we get rid of that, then there is no basis on which to interpolate, on which to project the things that are involved with the grosser level of incorrect consideration. In other words, if there is no solidly existing self, then you couldn't incorrectly consider it something non-static to be static, something impure to be pure, and so on. So when we consider something which is impure to be pure and something which is suffering to be happiness, then we get attachment and desire for it. So this is the sequence. So if we can get rid of the projection of self-established existence, we will, so the first link, we get ignorance, which is because of that projection. Remember, ignorance is taking it in the incorrect way to correspond to reality. So it's not the one that's doing the projecting. Then there's no basis on which to have that grosser level of incorrect consideration that, it's pure and happiness and all of that. So you don't develop attachment, and attachment is the nature of the craving and the obtainer. Those two links, the 8th and the 9th, which will activate the karmic potential. So you get throwing karma. So with getting rid of ignorance, you don't build up more karmic potentials, the second link. And because you've gotten rid of ignorance, you won't have the craving and obtainer attitudes, which will activate the old karmic potentials. And that's how we are able to get rid of the sequence of the links. And the example which is used is for understanding that it is merely the coming together of cause and effect, causes and conditions and stuff like that, giving rise to the effect, is the reflection in the mirror. And this we need to understand that in the Sautrantika and Chittamatra systems, that there are only two sources of valid types of valid cognition. One is bare cognition, so that is non-conceptual, and inferential cognition. That is for bare cognition. Bare perception is for obvious phenomenon, and the inferential is for obscure phenomenon. So obscure phenomenon either in terms of, where there's smoke, there's fire, so it's obscure. With words, what they actually represent, it's, what they mean. It's not obvious just from a sound, and from relying on logic to demonstrate the validity of scriptural authority. There's no reason, what Buddha said about obscure things is true, and, that we can verify by logic, and Buddha only became enlightened because of compassion, so there's no reason why a Buddha would deceive us. Therefore, what a Buddha said about extremely obscure karma and so on is valid. That's the logical proof of why Buddha is a valid source of information. Prasangika, coming from Chandrakirti, adds two more valid means of cognition. He adds one that the Sautrantikas said was not valid. The Samkhyas accepted it, which was arguing by analogy. The one that the Samkhyas were using was that this Indian ox, which has like a dewlap, something that is white, has a hump on the back, and some thing that hangs under its neck, and says you can understand what that is by the analogy of a cow. So this type of thing, and that would be the way. Also, it's not explained there, but using logic, that's how different inflections of a word are all coming from the same root of the word, by analogy. So present tense, past tense, these sort of things. But Chandrakirti accepts that as a valid means of cognition, and so we can know about voidness from, it is like space, it is like illusion-like, it's like a bubble, it is like, all these sort of analogies. So that's this analogy of the mirror, the reflection in the mirror, and he takes scriptural authority as a separate means of valid cognition, not as a form of inference. So slightly different in this system, but that is why it is said that this reflection in the mirror is the way to understand slightly obscure phenomenon like voidness. We can understand it either by inference or by analogy. So that is the reason for this statement. And then it is the coming together of the face and the mirror. But to get the image in the mirror, the image doesn't exist there from its own side, and so on. So on the basis of all of this, we would get a true cessation, a true stopping of the causes of suffering, and basically of ignorance, and these fleeting stains. And then there's the whole debate of that the true cessations are equivalent to voidness, where the object of refutation is non-existent. So truly, self-established existence. True cessations is the object of refutation are fleeting stains, the disturbing emotions and so on. The Jetsumba textbooks say that they are identical. The Pension textbooks say that they are not identical. So that's why, Rinpoche was saying, they're having this heated debate, because there's two ways of understanding that. The one that says that they are identical is speaking in terms of the double purity of the mind, that it was never stained, so that when you get rid of the other stain, the temporary stains, you come down to that it was never stained by them. So then it is identical, and this has to do with the whole debate has to do with the svabhavakaya, the nature body. The nature body is both the voidness of the mind, of the omniscient mind of a Buddha, and the true stoppings on the mind of the Buddha. And so, are they one thing or are they two different things? This is the whole reason for the debate. And with that, the session ended.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I can certainly answer some questions. I'm not tired. You guys, maybe? You young guys, or?
I have one question about the person.
One question about what?
The person.
The person.
As, or what is the basis of containing the defining characteristics of the person as posited by the lower schools, the non-Prasangika schools?
The non-Prasangika school says the basic, the defining characteristic is in the consciousness,
That's
mental
right.
consciousness, or alaya vijnana,
It seems to me,
or just in itself.
for example, as a Sautrantika, it
Yes.
seems quite difficult, to say when we say that mental consciousness contains the defining characteristics of the person, but is not the person. It's quite
Right.
to make that distinction is rather difficult, isn't it? Because if something contains the defining characteristics of a person, but is not a person because it is mind, that's difficult, isn't it?
Well, because the mental cognition, because the mental consciousness contains the defining characteristic of a person, we can say that I know, I see, I experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the mind experiences it or the mind knows, but I know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it contains the defining characteristic. But just because it contains two defining characteristics doesn't mean that they are identical, like I was giving the example of
Right.
Alex and Alexander.
Okay.
They're not identical.
Thank you.
I mean, the old Serkong Rinpoche, made a big deal out of that to identify what one means in the discussion of neither one nor many, because it is, usually not understood correctly.
Mm-hmm.
One means 100% identical.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the woman behind the back. Yeah.
About the suffering of aging.
Mm-hmm.
Rinpoche today explained that the aging starts from the moment of conception.
Right.
So
You start to get older as soon as you begin.
yes. Now my question is: the aging is one of the suffering characteristics of samsara, isn't it?
Yes.
So it seems to me that the suffering only starts after a certain age. Let's see, for example, until you become a young adult, it's better to become old, isn't it? Because you're more stronger and everything. And then the body decays. Isn't it that the suffering of aging?
Well, you would have to say that the suffering of aging is because of subtle impermanence. Each moment you are coming closer to your death. And you could die in the womb. You could, so there is that suffering that that aging process is bringing you closer to your death. That's why in Kalachakra, time is the enemy. Because it's birth, sickness, aging, and death. That's the enemy. of a way of describing samsara. So you want to overcome time. Not that you go to some realm that's outside of time, but you want to overcome the aggregates. I mean, all pervasive suffering, rebirth. And that is characterized by time. So I think it's you could understand that even, although the body grows to a certain point and then ages and decays, and Vaibhashika uses that analogy for describing a moment. A moment is for the thing to arise, endure a decay, and then perish. I think it's like that, that you get closer to death. Yeah, you have a question about that?
No, fine.
But you had a question?
From my perspective, it's...
Well, wait till you get the microphone, please.
I have a question, but in this context, even if you become an adult, there is suffering at each moment, and at each moment there is the change and the increase and decrease.
Well, yes, as you age, I mean, certainly a child has suffering, and a baby has suffering because it can't express itself, but that's not the suffering of the aggregates getting older, in a sense. I mean, I think that this is what he was referring to.
So my question is relating to all-pervasive conditioned suffering and samsara. What is the relation between the two? Like you have suffering of change, all-pervasive suffering, and you have the one which prevails all levels of samsara. But what is the relation between all-pervasive suffering and samsara?
All-pervasive suffering, conditioned suffering is
Yes.
samsara.
Okay. Yeah, go
It is samsara. That is,
But then,
yeah.
but then suffering should be part of all-pervasive suffering.
Yes, it's the all-pervasive suffering is the basis, because of these aggregates that we experience the suffering and the suffering of change. Mind you, the suffering and the suffering of change, think about that. That is referring, in the terms of the 12 links, the link of feeling.
Yes.
Feeling a level of happiness or unhappiness, and it is suffering. From another point of view, it's suffering because then we become attached to the happiness and we want to get rid of the unhappiness. So it is a source of suffering. That's why in the 4 placements of close mindfulness, we focus, on the feelings as the second noble truth, the source of suffering. So what we always have to do, this is what you do in analytical meditation, is try to put the pieces together. With the Dharma, we are given a jigsaw puzzle of little pieces, and we have to put them together. And they fit together in many different ways, not just one way, like a regular jigsaw puzzle. But I think that this is quite an accurate way of looking at, because we read this, we get this teaching, we get that teaching, and so on, and it's all bewildering, but, it all fits together. As Atisha said, for the benefits of the Lamrim, praising the Lamrim, that, we have to see all the teachings fit together, and they all are for one person, me. Jigsaw puzzle. Yes.
I have a question referring to the text on page 7 in the middle.
Root text or the Chandrakirti?
The Chandrakirti.
Right. I don't have the translation for that, but anyway.
Um,
And I don't but I don't approve of. I would.
you would not
I
approve
would
the
look
translation.
I would look at the Sanskrit actually and translate from that. But anyway,
Yeah,
let's see if I can understand from what
Yes.
you read.
It says.
I don't need the.
It says. Okay, when do you don't have the text, and it's maybe complicated. By not observing, he is not afflicted. Like it's talking about abundance, ignorance,
okay.
like familiarize, and then by not observing, he is not afflicted, and by not being afflicted, she does not act.
Right.
So
So
because I was thinking about makes no sense for me because a Buddha has an effect.
yeah,
So
well,
he's acting in a way. No?
Let's not try to make sense out of that
Nonsense.
translation. Because we are not focused on, taking as our object of cognition an appearance of self-established existence, then we do not have that ignorance of considering it incorrectly, and then we affect the affecting factor of karma. So that ignorance affects, so conditions that conditioning, that affected factor, conditioned factor, which is the karma. And so then on the basis of that karma, that karma itself is it's part of the action. It's not the action itself. So we then have that, we carry out, we implement it, and it continues with the consciousness and produces suffering. So it's like that. That's what that verse is, that line is saying.
Okay, I did not get it, but maybe some.
Well, the not aimed at
Yeah.
self-established existence,
Yeah, right.
then you don't have the ignorance of
Yes.
taking that appearance of self-established
Yes.
existence to correspond to something real.
Yes.
That ignorance conditions or affects the fact that we are because of that ignorance, then you take something to exist in a way that it doesn't.
Yes.
You think that it is clean when it is dirty, and so on, and then you have the disturbing emotions,
Yes.
and on the basis of that, you then have the impulse to think to get rid of it or steal it, and then the motion of the body or the sound of the speech to lie or to get it.
Okay.
So it conditions, it affects.
So the ignorance leads to the action.
The ignorance leads to the karma, to the effect. It's the karma itself, that impulse. Don't think of karma as action. That's completely misleading. It is the urging that pokes the consciousness to move, so it's compelling. So you're under control of that once it's doing that, and it's the motion of the body with which you cause the action to take place, or the blah 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 of the voice to cause the action of the speech to take place. So it, on the basis of that, and the disturbing emotion accompanies it.
This I
It
get.
comes before and accompanies it, and then that itself acts as a positive or negative potential. And after the motion is finished, or you've come to the decision, so it's finished, then it continues with the mental continuum as a potential in the form of a seed.
Yes, this is what I get. My maybe to rephrase my question is just a Buddha acts, right?
The Buddha has this enlightening influence, so that a Buddha doesn't have to do anything, but by the, just the way that a Buddha is,
Yeah.
it affects others.
Okay. This was my question.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe last question, because you guys are probably tired.
I have a question. I have a question concerning dependent arising.
Yes.
Actually, we learned that phenomena arise depending on its causes and conditions. And my question is mind a necessary condition or cause for things to exist?
It's a necessary cause for establishing that things exist, but not for making things exist.
Thank you. Answered.
Right. Sangye Shingde Migde Uwagi Jogunanta Shingla Jabasho Yedang Guru Ratna Mandala Kamneya Dayami
Jangjob
Semcho Rinpoche Magye Banam Gegyoche Geba Nyamba Mebayam Kone Gondu Belwa Sho. You know what the mandala offering, what you're reciting? I hope you know what the meaning of that verse is.
Well,
You're offering a pure land. And so by the positive force of this, may everybody, be able to enjoy a pure land, to be able to, spend all their time learning Dharma in the Pure Land. Well, hanging out at the swimming pool, and right. But 24/7, you are listening to teachings or meditating. There's no time. It's not a place to relax. Not at all. It's not a paradise. Right. It's just that you don't have to make a living, you don't have to eat, you don't have to go to the toilet. I mean, pardon?
you spoiled it for us.
You're spoiled, yes.